I'm going to start off with some questions. And Brett, I'd like to start with you. If you were running a bank in the MENA region, what were the first 3 things that you would do in line with Bank 3.0 to bring it on track?
First thing is...
Yes, first 3.
Yeah, so first thing, take the head of branches, branch distribution, and promote him to the head of mobile, because that's the future of the business. That sort of would break the back of the whole revenue or budget issue there. Secondly, hire a bunch of YGens, digital natives, to speak to the board about how they go through their daily life so that it becomes a bit realer, more real to the board members. Thirdly, look at how I'm going to create an API around the bank core system to enable all of these innovative things to happen so that we can create that next generation banking experience.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So Ed, let's look at you. Now, you've mentioned working with the Egyptian and South African governments. Can you tell us about any of the recent announcements in Nigeria?
What we announced last week, I think, is one of the most exciting projects in the world. We're working with the Nigerian Identity Agency for a card which, for huge swaths of the population, will truly provide them identity for the first time. It's combined with driver identification, health benefits, voter identification, and a prepaid MasterCard product, which they can use as the first steps for financial inclusion. We're working with Access Bank there to help provide the access to that. And there's 8 other banks which will also be participating in this program. But it will have a potential to reach tens of millions of people that we've never been able to reach before. And I think what's most inspiring about it is this combination of the identity program, the social benefits, the other things like driver identification and voting and other things combined with the payment product. And it's really about getting it right for those individuals.
Getting it right. I think that is the big question about today, isn't it? Getting it right for the end user. Jim, tell us, what is next? You seem to be doing everything, 20 things all at the same time. So what's on the scorecard right now?
Well, I'm sort of concentrating out of the payments world right now. And I'm looking at a way to decrease theft of online goods. It turns out, and I don't know if anyone would be interested in this, but I'll answer the question. When marginal cost falls to 0, so when an object is free, like a movie that can be downloaded or a video or things like that, theft just goes through the roof.
Yeah. And
so we're seeing this, and what's happening is it's destroying the link between the person who creates the content and the person who consumes it. And in the old days, if you made something, like when I make something physically, I know I'm going to get paid for it because it costs money to copy my work. Even if you wanted to do it, you would still have to spend money. But with digital goods, this is not the case. And the payment system as it exists today has evolved to pretty much handle physical objects. So there's this sort of tacit assumption in payments that everything we buy has some marginal cost. And when that fails to be true, then we have all these sort of anomalies in the market. And so what I'm working on right now are a series of economic models that can combat theft. And the long and short of that is that if you do this correctly, you can direct more money from the content consumers to the content creators. And that's the focus of my work right now.
So anti-fraud is the big way forwards, yeah? Security heightening up?
It's not a question of fraud. It's a question of theft.
Theft.
So fraud is essentially an identity spoofing. Theft is just consumption. Like, you can steal it and have everyone know that you stole it, but you can still steal it. So.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic.
The fraud issue is a good one because we always have this issue of security and technology and the role security plays. Yeah, but when we first started to pay for stuff online with credit cards, everyone was, don't put your credit card online. We get over that. The utility will the security issues in here. And the bigger problem we have with fraud is actually social engineering. It's not the technology, right?
Social engineering is the highlighted subject here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you that we have 3 prizes to give away. They are Sea Wings. That is a 40-minute flight over Dubai, and we are looking at giving 3 of these away, 1 from each of our speakers. So can we open this up to the floor for questions? First of all, can we have a show of green or red cards? How many small business owners do we have today in the audience? How many small business owners do we have in the audience? I've got a green card here. You almost deserve a prize for yourself. Yeah, we've got some. Did I see some green cards over here? Yeah, so we've got 2 or 3 small merchants. Excellent. How many bankers have we got in the audience? Show those green cards. Oh my goodness. Ed, you did bring your support network, didn't you? Yeah, we've got a lot of bankers. And how many of you are working in the corporate field? Show those green cards. How many are in the corporate markets? Yeah, okay. Great, good to know some demographics. Thank you. Now, do we have any questions from the floor? We've got some roaming microphones. At this rate, sir, you look as though you've got a guaranteed prize.
Ahmed Al-Tanani, Gulf Capital.
Name, company, and question, please, sir.
Question for Ed. I wanted to ask how MasterCard was engaging with startups in the emerging payment sector outside of the US, so Europe, Middle East, Africa.
So, question.
Can you repeat your question again, please?
The question was, from an emerging payments perspective, how we're engaging with startups, particularly globally, outside of the US.
Yep. Well done, Ed.
In fact, what it's important to recognize is the vast majority of our business is outside of the U.S. today. It's U.S. is less than 40% of our business, and the growth rates we're seeing everywhere else are far exceeding it. So it's essential for us to make sure that we're working with entrepreneurs around the world to be able to enable the capabilities that the payment network can provide for them. We have 2 programs I'd point to. One is our Open API program. If you go to Developer Zone, MasterCardDeveloperZone.com, they'll provide, I think there's about 20 to 30 services that are available for that right now to take advantage of. And we also have with MasterPass, a MasterPass program to help people to immediately be able to embed that into applications and other environments to receive payment. So those are the 2 ways we're supporting developers.
And I might...
Yeah, we've got something to add.
So,
Jim?
Speaking as somebody who, 4 years ago was a payment startup, I met Ed for the first time in his conference room in Purchase, New York. At the time, Square was just 3 people. We had this little demo that we could hold in our pocket, and we did the demo for Ed. His exact words were, "You realize this violates our merchant acquiring rules." But it's something we need to do. And he worked with us for, it took months, it took probably 6 months, but he worked with us, and the whole MasterCard team was tremendously supportive of the innovation that was necessary to take this series of rules, which evolves over time, and needs to be updated from time to time. And I won't speak ill of any payment rails, but I will say this, of all of them, MasterCard got it first and was the most supportive of our efforts as a startup that was unknown.
Well
and it
done,
was meaningful.
MasterCard.
Yeah, and it was this guy. I mean, Ed was the guy who, at that meeting, made it happen.
Let me tell you, quickly,
yeah.
let me tell you the other side of that story, because it was a proud moment for me. One of the things that we've always said is the practices can, should, and will change. It's the principles that are important. So the principle of protecting the integrity of the network, of moving money, those principles are essential. But when Jim and others are inventing new practices to take advantage of technologies that didn't exist before, it's something we need to embrace. And I was telling Jim earlier, so it was great for me, is after we had worked together, literally the next summer, probably the most pure entrepreneur I know. It's a kid who started pushing a cart before he could drive. He now has a little ice cream truck in my town. Showed up that summer proudly accepting MasterCard. And he doesn't know me. I'm just a guy in town. I asked him, well, why are you now taking MasterCard? And he said, because people like it and they buy more ice cream. And I think that's the value proposition. It's how working together we can harness these new technologies to bring real value to people.
Yeah, it's a very, very noted point. Do we have another question? Yes, I presume it's not you, Freya, but the gentleman next to you.
Okay, my question is from James. And James, do you think that acquiring banks should launch their own product themselves, then tying up with an MPOS vendor when banks have existing acquiring infrastructure, when bank has mobile application in place, which is used for mobile banking, and when bank can directly buy MPOS devices from the manufacturers?
Well, so that's an interesting question, and let me see if I get it. The question is, do I think it makes sense for acquiring banks to issue their own?
Yeah, that's the question, yeah.
And I think it depends on the acquiring bank and the relationships you have with the people, with your customers. In most cases, in the United States, small businesses have relationships with multiple banks, but they've got one primary bank. So if you're the primary bank, absolutely it makes sense. It's a very natural flow. And the heuristic I use for determining that is what's the least amount of hassle for the customer, okay? So if it was possible for me, without using an intermediary, to just have a relationship where I could take money and it went into my bank account, that's the simplest possible payment structure, assuming you have a bank account at all, okay? So under that assumption, if that acquirer was also the bank that I was banking at, yes. Now, if the acquiring bank is different from the bank that the customer deals with, as is the case in most US transactions, then the answer is, well, it's less valuable. Especially when you have bank to bank. In the US, it gets very difficult. So bank to bank has never worked in the United States. It's never been a clean solution. But what country are you thinking of doing this in? So that's...
Took his mic away.
Oh. Yeah.
The question was, which country?
Yeah, I'm working with a bank in Qatar, and
in Dubai.
the question, Qatar, which is in
Qatar.
Yeah,
okay.
Doha, Qatar.
Okay.
Yeah, so my question was specific to that market, which is not very different from UAE.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the best lens to look through is what's the simplest thing for the customer. So if the customer doesn't have to switch their bank, they can do it. Now, in the early days of Square, what we found was that certain customers were switching to banks because they had better payment rails, because we clear at the end through ACH, and some banks are just lousy with that. And they would say, well, how come my friend gets his money the next day and I get it in 3 days? And we're like, well, it's your bank. So there's a lot of that. But whenever you can simplify it for the customer, you'll have great user adoption. Simplicity is fantastic.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, James.
Thank you very much, sir. Now, I believe we have a question. It's at 1 or 2 questions down here. I believe we've got 2 questions. Yes, sir. Your name, your company, and your question. Who are you directing it at, please?
I'm actually responding to the question before and this particular question. My name is Eric Holstrones. I'm from a company called Swift. And just want to say we're working with mobile POS projects with MasterCard as a startup all over the world, Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, and they have been incredibly supportive. A similar experience, I'm sure, to what you had at the beginning with really providing us with all the support that we need to deliver to the client. And in response to your question, actually what we do is we help the banks and we enable the banks to deliver MPOS very, very quickly. That's what we do.
Thank you for your question, sir. And did you also have a question, sir, in the front? No? Do we have any more questions? Yes, we've got I believe our small business representative. Fabulous.
Good afternoon. My name is Janine Bansouda. I'm president of Bansouda Consulting. First, I just want to thank all the speakers. Very inspiring speeches. This question is kind of addressed to everyone, but in particular Brett, because it's really to do with kind of where banking is going and what banking means. a lot of what we do is focused around making organizations authentic in what they're delivering. And I think for banks, my question is, are banks going to become the next Intel Inside sticker on mobile phones? So we don't really care who you are. We need to get stuff done. We're not interested in hearing how, large your wingspan is. Which one of you is going to support my needs most effectively? Is that where we're heading?
So to Jim's point earlier, where he said if you make things simpler,
Yeah.
One of the great innovations Square had was not just turning your phone into a point of sale, but was getting rid of the merchant onboarding friction, which was extremely complex. Now, when you take financial service interactions, particularly in the retail space, but to some extent in the small business and commercial space as well, there is a ton of friction. In fact, banks have a special word for friction. They call it risk mitigation, right? So when you get rid of that friction and create really great customer experiences, you abstract a lot of what banks say is their value today, like advice and process and credit risk and these sort of things. So when you get to the end of it, if you take like a debit card experience and a payment experience, the value store of a bank, once you revolutionize the payment itself, the bank is just the value store. The payments processor does as much work as the bank does in the relationship. So the value, the differentiation of the bank in that scenario is very, very low. And branch network has zero value in that scenario. So yes, to some extent, there's going to be a bunch of banks who become very abstracted, that can't invest in retail differentiation, and will just become that value store or the wholesale provider of an experience. Others will, develop their customer journeys and the customer experience at the front end with more finesse. And to some extent, we're going to see a lot more startups coming in, hooking in to banks and doing the retail customer experience better than banks can do it because they don't have the constraints, but they'll have to sit on top of that regulated entity with the payments rails and so forth. So maybe you're going to have a bit of a split between the distribution and the manufacturing of the industry as well.
We have time for one more question from our audience. Is there any other questions?
I saw one.
I hear so many voices as backlash that I'm not entirely sure if it's my audience or outside. Okay, we have one more question here. Microphone coming. Name, company, and who your question is for, sir.
Yes, my name is Rizwan. I'm with HSBC, and my question is for James. Is the rest of the world ready for Square? I mean, I know you had a great timing issue when you went into the US, but I've seen you haven't expanded out of the continental US at this point in time. So, I mean, are we ready? Is there something you're waiting for?
Well, we certainly hope to find out. I don't know is the answer. And to be totally candid, we didn't know if it was going to work in the U.S. Jack and I got together. We had a problem that was very personal to me and to some people that I knew, and we set out to solve that problem. And Square's now got 500 people at the company. They were all very, very bright. Innovations coming in all sorts of directions, and I would say yes. I think there are going to be some innovations that we will have for the rest of the world, and I think those innovations are not going to be the same that we used in the United States because the payment ecosystems are different. And one of the things that I was very happy to see here was that the UAE has people that are dedicated to an identity system, which is super important and, by the way, necessary in the United States. I used to run a roofing company, okay? So I used to crawl up on roofs, and in the roofing business, half the workers are undocumented. They don't have good IDs. And it's just a fact of life that if you're going to run payments in that world, it's all cash. And it's a very unfair system. It takes advantage of a lot of people. Every system has its own areas of pain. And if you are going to serve the needs of a different population, you have to adapt to each local population. I know what I'm saying is kind of trite, but I mean, really, it's how we look at this. And the trick to Square's expansion is going to be to have the humility to not just clone what's working in the United States, but to actually adapt on a nation-by-nation basis.
Thank you very much, Jim, and thank you very much to our audience for their questions. Now, we've had 5 questions and we've got 3 vouchers. Good luck, gentlemen. I would like you to confer. We've got 3 awards. Who are we going to give them to? I think we started off with Mr. Ahmed, then we went to a gentleman in front of him. There was a gentleman here, Eric, Jenny, and then we finished off with Rizwan. So, gentlemen, you're conferring. Ladies and gentlemen, before we award those vouchers, I'd like to thank you for joining us here today at the Cards and Payments keynote. This is the morning session, and they are going to be coming back in the afternoon. So why not visit the exhibition this afternoon, or even the Mobi's exhibition next door? This afternoon, we'll be starting back here at 14:30, and you can learn about the NFC mobile wallet and the new Wave services, or indeed visit me on the launch pad on the wall between this exhibition hall and the next. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be awarding some vouchers now, and then we are breaking for lunch. May I have the vouchers, please, Freya? So, have you all come to your decision?
Yes, we have.
Fantastic. Are you going to launch them one by one or just collectively?
Jim, you start.
I thought the person who asked about the acquiring banks getting into a mobile point of sale
So I think that was Ahmed?
Yeah.
Was it Ahmed?
Ahmed.
Yeah.
No,
yes.
Was it Ahmed or the gentleman in front?
There we go.
Well done. So 1 Seawood voucher, a 40-minute flight to over Dubai. Not bad. Although neither of these gentlemen will be your pilot, I'm afraid, either by night or day. Who's our second voucher for?
We all love the entrepreneurial question about how do we hook into the systems to bring new value.
So being awarded to Ahmed, thank you for your question. And our third one, Brett.
So Janine also gets the award for the most tweets, I think. So Janine, you get the vote because it was a good question on Intel Inside
Fantastic.
approach and tweeting.
Great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a big round of applause. Brett King, Ed McLaughlin, and Jim McKelvey.